And we'll also get the slide deck posted on our website in the normal place. Just a quick right, about what we're presenting, everything, right, true, up to date till now, right, but always subject to change. And we run through a lot of those changes here over time. And then, no one's authorized to make any changes to this presentation as it's currently constituted. But like I said, we will get it posted so everyone has access. As we show you the agenda for today, again, just to reiterate, this is a complex process version. We will have another meeting here in a couple months to discuss what would be the simplified residential process. So we'll be touching on, some of the normal topics around screening and portal support and those type of things. But we will be touching on a little bit more heavily the some of the variations we've seen in the complex interconnection process, right? Group studies, ASO studies, stuff that had become more prevalent over the last couple of years, right? That have shifted some of the timelines and some of the impacts of the projects and the steps that they have to go through. So we'll be trying to touch on those and looking to answer some questions around that as we get into the Q&A here at the end. We will be dropping in the chat a link to the Q&A so you can submit your questions, and we will accumulate all of those and get to as many as we can today, right, as we work through trying to get the questions answered. But if we don't get through them all, we will plan to put a Q&A doc together with everything that we received and be able to post that in the same place that we do this presentation and the recording. So as we continue to progress, as is customary here with us, National Grid, we touch on safety messages. Sometimes I talk to various developers who give us a hard time about our safety message and how relevant they are. But as we get into this one, and you'll see as we go through the presentation, and we're packing a lot of information on these slides. So I want to talk about eye strain, right? And taking a look at these slides and anything we do as we are still working in a remote world, and most of our meetings are virtual and those type of things. We spend a lot of time staring at computer screens, and if not computer screens, our phones and various other devices overall. So just kind of keep that eye strain in mind. The one that I'll point out here, right, is the 20-20-20 rule, something that I try to do often, right? But you want to, every 20 minutes or so, look 20 feet away, right, for 20 seconds, and try to just change your viewpoint overall, just to give your eyes a break from staring at the blue lights and the screens. And there are other tools that you can use, right? Whether they're blue blockers or those type of things, glasses that you can use if you are spending a lot of time on various screens. But keep eye strain in mind, and something that we're going to test here a little bit as we get into some of these slides. Just moving quickly forward, just some quick hitters I want to talk about here. I made mention of one of them already. Or a couple of them already, right? We will be posting the slide deck, the recording, and a Q&A doc here over the next several days. To get all that up, here's the link, same link that we've used in the past for other seminars. So if you have that already, just go back to the same place. And we have past seminars still posted there, right? And as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit more about group study, about ASO study than we are the standard process itself. But if you're interested more in just knowing, the standard process, you can go back and look at our April presentation from 2023 that does discuss a little bit more heavily that standard process in there. The other thing I'll mention quickly is that on July 18th, we have the simplified meeting, right? Again, this one's focused on complex and the complex interconnection process. And we will be discussing more simplified residential process on July 18th. So another success that we had this past year, one of our major questions that we got all the time was just, can we know more about group studies? What's going on with group studies? What's going on in these general areas? So what we did do is we put together a monthly update that we have posted on our website also, that we will update around the middle of every month to make sure that we can share information around groups, around different areas, what's happening in those areas, trying to provide as much information around timeline, current status, to give the opportunity for people to see, what areas may be, progressing, maybe be opening up for more applications to be able to move forward. And hopefully it becomes a helpful tool, but we tried to address a lot of the questions that we had been receiving. And again, trying to make sure that we're providing the information to everybody, consistently and at the same time. So hopefully that becomes helpful. We are open to feedback. We've already taken some feedback on it, and we will look to, make tweaks and changes and updates to it, trying to provide as much information as we can over time. But overall, a success last month as we got that posted, and hopefully has already become helpful. Another quick topic we just want to discuss is the transfer of ownership, right? What we're seeing is we're now getting into, a lot of our sites being up and running for a decade or more. Right, it's the stuff gets sold, stuff gets moved around, and our records are starting to get a little bit off kilter. And I just want to reiterate that if there is a transfer of ownership, if there is a sale of the site, you should be letting National Grid know, so we can get the right paperwork, we can get our system updated and make sure all of our records are good to go, right? It does pop up in a couple of places, outages for one, right? If we do have an outage and we are sending an email to whoever owned the project the last time, it can come as a surprise, right? When that happens. Reconciliation, cost sharing, payouts, right? We've run into situations where these projects have changed hands, and as we get into cost sharing, we look to pay some of that stuff back. We don't have the right addresses on file, so if you are changing addresses, it's good to update it. If you are selling the project and you're the new owner, making sure that we do have the right information for who owns it now, and just the record keeping aspect of it, right? For us to have the right records is really important for us. Another quick hitter is just around Schedule Z and community solar. I don't know if it's made its way out there overall, but we have increased the number of opportunities to make changes to your Schedule Z up to 6 times a year. So we're able to do that, and make sure that can continue to be updated and tweaked as changes are happening out there too. And just a quick success. So we run our fiscal year from April to March. So we track our megawatts connected over that 12-month rolling time frame. But just a couple of stats here, right? We had over 16,000 applications come in between both the complex and the simplified process, and got just over 208 megawatts connected. Specifically for complex, we got about 100 megawatts over the course of 945 applications. So just breaking that down, things are still moving. We're still interconnecting a number of megawatts. We're seeing a lot of success in the simplified space too, getting a number of those applications pushed through and interconnected. So we continue to work and get as many as we can connect on a yearly basis. So. But with that, I'll make just one quick message, right? I'm going to go off camera now. The presenters are not going to go on camera. But if, to keep cameras down to bandwidth reasons, right? We are approaching 100 people on this call, and I ask everybody to stay on mute and submit questions through the link that we have in the chat. With that, I'm going to hand it over to JJ to start talking about the screening review process.
And just as JJ's getting lined up, Dan, who's one of our guests, just so you know, your camera is on. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, so just might want to turn that off. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Will. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody. I'm JJ. I run the screening team here for National Grid. I'm going to be covering the initial part of the standard interconnection process this morning. We're going to start with pre-applications. So pre-applications are required for any proposed system that's greater than 250 kW. and the required fees are listed per size of the proposed system. When submitting a pre-application, there's 4 pieces of information that we require to be able to provide a completed report. This includes the site address, the aggregate system size, the generation type, whether it's PV, CHP, wind, hydro, and then any uploaded screenshot using any web mapping platform like Google Maps, Bing Maps, and Assessor's Maps, just so that we can get detailed information of the area that you plan to interconnect. Pre-apps are completed within 10 business days from the finalized submission. And then we have multiple resources for developers and customers looking to determine where to apply for new interconnections, including our heat map and our hosting capacity maps. The pre-app report provides a lot of useful information across all those resources while providing the most up-to-date knowledge of internal system information, including any kind of feeder reconfigurations or substation challenges that we might have in the area. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot of a finalized pre-application report indicating all of the feeder and circuit information, where the proposed site is looking to interconnect, including any kind of challenges, if it's in a group study area that could add additional time frame to the projects, if there's any ongoing studies in the area, any kind of challenges, and any required potential system configurations that you could possibly be required to provide during the application review. In addition to these 2 pages, there's about 12 or 13 total pages in a completed pre-app once it's updated that we're currently working on. And it's going to include a bunch of useful links, location to all of the ESB standards, all of our tariff regulatory things. And on the next slide is a quick screenshot of the application checklist. The application checklist has multiple pages of the details surrounding what needs to be submitted during the interconnection application. Once the pre-app is approved and the developer or customer determine that they do want to proceed forward during their application submittal, it's going to require everything that's on that checklist. So it's going to require completed Exhibit C, the application fee, billing account number, system size, any assets being used for that system, the account location, site plan, line diagram, any documentation as far as inverter tech sheets, storage tech sheets, ESS questionnaire and narrative, legal information documents, all of which is detailed throughout the application checklist at the end of the pre-app report. So for complex projects, we have a few portal updates in the works, as well as screening updates that are going to make it a little bit easier to submit and have visibility of everything that's required. And then when submitting anything with batteries, anything ESS related, there's going to be additional documents that need to be submitted, including like the battery storage checklist and an ES narrative, which I'll talk a little bit in detail on the next slide. With submissions, these are some of the most commonly missing items that typically lead to holds. Any kind of discrepancies between the documents, whether that's addresses, billing account numbers, lack of a work request number, everything needs to match when you submit it between the legal information form, the portal, the Exhibit C. All the documents have to have that uniformity across them. Missing, UL certificates or anti-bonding forms, curtailment letters, things like that are going to lead to holds. And then on one line diagram specifically, like they need to have inverter and interrupting device nameplate rating, relay settings, the make and model and voltage, the current ratings, DG protective settings, and then everything that's laid out in that checklist. On the site plan, one of the most common occurrences is not detailing where the company equipment is, where the intent of interconnection is, the point of common coupling or the demarcation point, and some additional notes like the road is wide enough for us to be able to access our equipment. And another newer one, especially for standalone storage, is the auxiliary work request number. For standalone storage, due to our interpretation of ISO, we like to have and confirm that if you're going to move forward with a standalone storage system, that you know that any auxiliary loads could require a second auxiliary service work request. Next slide, please. These are just some of the guidelines for when we look at submissions that it's good to know, including how we won't provide 300 kVA, anything larger than a 300 kVA transformer for standalone storage. All commercial meters and disconnects need to be grouped together. Any existing metering located on a pad transformer will need to be required to be relocated for any new standalone system. Smart meter installations require disconnecting means on both the line and load side for any self-contained 480 volt systems. MA smart systems over half a megawatt must be located with energy storage systems. Any final metering location will be up to operations to determine if it's safe and accessible enough for them to be able to maintain it. And then no work should begin until the metering department has approved the final disconnected metering locations on site with the electrician and developer. Next slide, please. Once the application's been reviewed and accepted, then the case progresses to screening. During screening, we take an in-depth and detailed review of the proposed system configurations, the area and system infrastructure, and kind of provide the most feasible path forward, and any feedback about how the system needs to be configured and built. We also check radio and network systems, make sure that all the required listings for all the equipment is UL 1741SB, and then do substation backfeed screens, 3V0 screens, anti-islanding or islanding screens. If any of those checkpoints fail, they need to, proceed to impact study for further detailed modeling. Anything on a 4 kV feeder that's 25 kW or larger is considered, will be considered to go down the standard path due to the limitations on those systems. And then anything on any non-grounded or non-effectively grounded system also is considered a standard regardless of the size due to the required studies that are needed for any kind of non-effectively grounded system. Next slide, please. These are some of the constraints or system challenges that are going to be detailed and laid out during the screening process, whether there's any ongoing studies, whether that feeder is a challenging feeder, the hosting capacity, if there's limitations or if there are none in the area that you're proposing to interconnect the project, if there's any feeder reconfiguration or any large feeder work going on, ungrounded, non-effectively in HT lines, those will be detailed and explained as to why that interconnection can follow the standard track. Any planned substation work at any feeder saturation that would cause challenges are some of the reasons that some projects need to follow the standard track. Next slide, please. Next few slides are just like a finalized screening memo. This will be changing soon. On here is all the information for any particular project that gets through screening, where we detail and lay out all of the information available for that substation, for that feeder, for that area. And then if it passes or fails any of what we screen, and whether or not or how it'll proceed down the standard track. If the project doesn't require further study, it could progress to conditional approval, or supplemental review for any projects in a group study area that are originally held to go via the standard track. Next slide, please. This is the generating equipment that's submitted, that we like to have developers and customers verify. Everything matches up with what they're proposing. It also includes the verbiage for everything that's UL 1741SB required. Unless it's like a gas power turbine or a fuel cell, then those are on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. The last page of the screening report has some references that just go into our standards and specifications, and then a bunch of additional information on websites for what some of the verbiage in that screening memo means. Once the screening process is finalized, it'll go into screening complete, and most of the time, if you are not in a group study area, you'll receive an invoice for an impact study. And if you are in a group study area, it's going to proceed to that proper person on the complex team to let you know about the following path forward once screening is completed. That was a very brief overview of screening. I'm going to pass this off to Jacques to talk about the standard and complex process.
All right, thanks, JJ. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Jacques, and glad you could join us for today's session. In this next section, we'll highlight several key items in the standard interconnection and group study process. Taking a high-level view, once the project moves through the screening process and it is determined the project must continue to the standard interconnection path, the National Grid will prepare a distribution study for the individual project or group of projects. At the completion of the study, customer review and acceptance of the study results, National Grid will draft the interconnection service agreement for execution. The project will continue down the path for design, construction and project management, witness test efforts, meter installation, and finally to authorization to interconnect, inclusive of applicable asset registration requirements with ISO New England. This step is managed by National Grid unless the customer and project circumstances dictate otherwise. Next slide, please. This table on the slide is pulled directly from the DG interconnection tariff. It shows the time frames in which tasks must be completed by the company. The maximum number of days allowed to complete the effort, not including holds, is 200 business days under the standard process. The construction schedule is established on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. With regard to the energy storage system timelines, during the screening process where the substation and electric power system components are identified, proposed operational information for the battery energy storage system is collected from the customer through the Energy Storage System Operating Narrative and the Energy Storage System Questionnaire. This includes standalone or co-located systems. The study timeframe, as shown in this slide, will be affected based on the customer's desired operational mode, charging and discharging, in a scheduled and unscheduled manner, in this case, 95 business days for study, or studied in either a scheduled or unscheduled manner to mitigate study time, in this case, 55 business days. The company will provide the customer with a preliminary assessment detailing system capacity and potential EPS modifications to interconnect the battery energy storage system. Once delivered, the customer must respond within 10 business days, notifying the company how they desire to move forward. If National Grid does not receive a response within a set time frame, then the project will be studied in the mode of full nameplate capacity in an unscheduled operation in the 55 business day period. Design changes are subject to DG tariff policy for moderate or significant changes. The company determines whether the change request is moderate or significant on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. Let's review some common issues in moving the distribution study forward to the interconnection service agreement. Many times, the entity completing the legal information document does not provide alternate contact information for the applicant or the interconnection customer if different, or sometimes does not provide standard contact info, phone number, and email address are missed. This information is important in case the customer is not responsive through Salesforce Chatter. The one-line diagram cannot be deemed an official record until the electrical professional engineer stamp is applied to the diagram. Details for charging and discharging are also required on the one line and is sometimes missed. Remember, only click the Finalize Submission button when uploading the customer executed interconnection service agreement to the Salesforce case. Next slide, please. With regard to commissioning, documentation should include at least one of the following: a 2-second shutdown disconnect open test procedure, a 5 minutes before restart when disconnect is closed test procedure, and confirming documentation showing the system aligns with the as-built details. The inverter relay frequency should also be listed. With regard to pictures, the pictures must show appropriate plaques at eye level regarding power system elements and applicable warnings regarding voltage, electrical hazard, and location of the AC utility disconnect switch, if not at the same location as a revenue quality meter. Documentation for qualifying facilities is required, inclusive Schedule A, the P rate, and for those generator QF projects greater than 60 kW, a W-9 tax form, an automated clearinghouse form for payment processing, and the supplier enrollment form. These items are needed so the company can register the facility again with ISO New England to be compensated in the administered wholesale electricity market at the hourly real-time clearing price. As noted on the last slide, the as-built single-line diagram must have the professional electrical engineer stamp and signed document by the individual who performed the commissioning test. Lastly, insurance documents must be submitted to the company according to the DG tariff as noted in item 5. Next slide, please. With regard to standard review path reminders, let's take a look at a few items to think about on this slide. The intent of a study, impact, detailed, or group, is to ascertain the effect on the EPS and if any system upgrades are required and assess the cost of the identified upgrades. If system modifications are identified, the company has 60 days to conduct the study. If the company anticipates the cost of the system upgrades will be equal to or greater than $1 million, the company will review the study with the customer or group to possibly extend the study timeline. After the study is completed, and the customer or group agree, the company will draft the interconnection service agreement with the estimated company construction timeline and associated construction cost. If a detailed study was conducted, the customer can request an early draft of the ISA, which does not provide a construction timeline. Also note, the initial contribution in aid of construction, pronounced kayak, the down payment is due within 60 business days of the executed interconnection agreement. Design and project management efforts are initialized once the down payment is made. These payments do not have a cure period, and if payments are not made within the prescribed time, the project application will be withdrawn. The customer is strongly advised to start obtaining applicable easements, right-of-way, and other permits as soon as possible in order to kick off the construction process. Next slide, please, to metering reminder. With regard to meter installation, please take a look at the bulleted items, and I'll provide a narrative of 3 primary points. Meter and metering requirements are detailed in Electric System Bulletin 750, Specifications for Electrical Installations, Section 7, Metering. The 2024 version was posted in March of this year. First point, as I quote the ESB, the company will furnish, install, own, maintain, and connect all meters required for billing purposes solely at the delivery voltage on the customer side of the service point in accordance with the company's applicable tariff and applicable state laws and regulations. Second point, the customer is responsible for wiring the meter socket in accordance with the National Electric Code, and I quote, furnishing satisfactory evidence of the safe condition of said wiring. Proof of evidence is the inspection approval certificate. The third summary point, meters and meter sockets are potential hazards. Please make sure the meter socket is not used for any other purpose that is described in the ESB, in particular, Section 7.3, self-contained meter socket installation, where it states, meter socket enclosures shall not be used as junction boxes or wireways for splices or taps. The customer shall consult with the company prior to meter socket enclosure installation when considering a meter installation used other than the preferred wiring configuration. Next slide, please. Witness test and completion docs. Please review the next set of bulleted items as I provide a short narrative on several takeaways. As linked on this slide, the completion documents and checklists are located on the MA Interconnection Documents webpage under the heading Expedited and Standard Completion Documentation Forms. Your account manager is a great resource if you have questions on the completion effort and prepping the documents. Make sure the witness test checklist includes pictures of the generator nameplate capacity. The checklist, inclusive of the witness test procedure, electrical inspection, as-built one-line diagram, stamped by a certified professional electrical engineer, must be approved by National Grid. Finally, construction by the customer and National Grid must be completed before the witness test is initiated. With regard to compliance and asset registration, National Grid will applicably manage the registration process with ISO unless the customer desires otherwise. Next slide, please. Consideration of document revisions. The customer must cloud or otherwise highlight the change and update the revision block with the date the document was updated. Single line diagrams must be stamped again with a certified professional electrical engineer designation. If a study was completed by the company and the customer decides to make changes, then the customer must select the change request button on the DG portal page for the given case. Submit the applicably revised documents to allow the company to determine if a restudy is required. Restudy timelines and costs will be determined by the company. The construction effort will be on hold until the customer is informed of the restudy results, applicable revised construction timeline, cost revisions, and executes an amended interconnection agreement. Next slide to the end of year. Thank you. For those customers seeking end-of-year interconnections as a project winds its way towards the completion of the overall process and all requirements are achieved or within range of completion, the company will make best effort to accommodate these requests. However, National Grid does not guarantee any and all requests will interconnect by year-end. Customers should make best effort to meet dates listed on this slide. Effectively, no later than October 1, customers must submit the witness test procedure, applicable supporting documents, and energization plan. No later than November 15th, customer construction should be completed and all completion documents, as noted earlier in this presentation, should be received and confirmed in good order by National Grid. Next slide, please. Now let's take a look at key elements for group study. Next slide. Please take a look at the graphics on this slide. Group study processes are detailed in section 3.4.1 of the DG tariff. A group is a combination of two or more generator facilities with a proposed location in a common study area. National Grid will assess if a single study covering multiple generator projects in the common study area is the appropriate study path for efficiency and cost allocation where common system modifications may be applicable. Thank you. As shown on this slide, the process flow is similar to standard process, except there are additional business day allowances for the overall process for an open group window, up to 40 business days, and 20 business days for the scoping meeting, and built-in days to allow customers to submit varied changes or requests that may or may not affect group composition or other group process tasks. As shown in this table, given the number of applicants in a group, aggregate nameplate megawatts, and anticipated system upgrade cost, a group study can take up to 160 business days to complete once the study starts, notwithstanding an ASO hold as indicated on the next slide. Next slide, please. Prior to the ASO hold, which we'll review on the upcoming slides, the company performs a preliminary assessment to determine and identify potential high-level impacts for system upgrades to allow customers to submit change requests for their proposed generator facilities to mitigate potential costs. Once the company completes the study, customers have 15 business days to inform the company if they will proceed with the application and move forward to the interconnection agreement and closing efforts. Next slide, please. For additional information regarding group studies, please go to the noted links in this slide, where the first link brings you to the group studies page, and the second link brings you to the DG portal, and the group study status is located on the far right tab. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll talk about the affected system operator, or ASO study, on the upcoming slides. Next slide. To make sure we're all on the same page, let's understand the regional nuances of the acronym ASO and the elements of an ASO. First, ASO means affected system owner, such as another New England transmission owner, another electric distribution company, or the electric power system owned and operated by a municipality. Second, ASO means affected system operator, such as the independent system operator of New England, which is ISO New England. In the Northeast, other potential affected system operators in electrical proximity to New England are the New York ISO, which administers the New York bulk power system, and certain Canadian transmission owners or applicable ISOs with external interface ties to the New England bulk power system. The ASO study, if deemed necessary, although complex, has a simple goal: identify and determine electrical solutions to mitigate adverse impact to the electric power system of any affected entity where a new generator interconnection or distribution or transmission system upgrades are proposed. Next slide, please. Affected parties, roles, and governance. In the New England power system footprint, there are 4 primary players involved with the ASO study, and it's important to recognize their roles and effect on the timing of the overall ASO study process and eventual return to the continuation of the distribution study. The distribution arm for National Grid represents the first contact for the customer. As the EDC, engineering obtains technical specs for the project and manages the distribution study. As part of the process, the EDC identifies a potential transmission area owned by National Grid that may be affected by the proposed generator interconnection and passes the information to National Grid transmission team. The EDC arm is bound to the MADG tariff. The N-Grid Transmission Group, identified as a transmission owner, receives this information and takes a deeper look into the transmission implications, current asset structure, and pending interconnections in the area in their preliminary analysis. In addition, the transmission arm requires PSCAD models and PSSE models as applicable to the nameplate capacity of the proposed generator. The TO is bound to the transmission operating agreement executed with ISO New England. ISO New England, as a New England power system administrator, confers with the TO and assesses if there are any affected entities impacted by the proposed generator interconnection. If yes, then ISO will coordinate with the TO and the affected party, which could be an electrically adjacent TO, EDC, or municipality. In rare occurrences, ISO coordinates the ASO study effort with an affected external TO and applicable independent system operator due to the complex nature of the electric power system. ISO New England is bound to its transmission, markets, and services tariff, which outlines its functions and roles. ISO is also bound to the entities that executed the market participant service agreement with ISO New England. The final member of this relationship matrix is the NEPOOL Reliability Committee, which is a principal advisory body to ISO New England. The committee may approve, no finding of adverse impact, or deny, by finding adverse impact, the proposed generator interconnection. The NEPOOL Reliability Committee is bound to the second restated NEPOOL agreement. The companies that are voting members of the committee are also bound to the market participant service agreement executed with ISO New England. Okay, next slide. As noted previously, and regardless of an ASO determination, PSCAD models are required for generator facilities greater than 1 megawatt and less than 5 megawatts. PSSE models are required for generator facilities equal to or greater than 5 megawatts in addition to the PSCAD model. Shortly after the project application exits the screening process and meets the stated criteria, the customer energy integration team sends out the request for the applicable model. The clock starts ticking as the unknown element of the ASO study that is yet to be determined. The company confirms regularly with ISO New England for ASO study determination. If ISO New England deems an ASO study is not required for a project, then it can be formally prepared for submittal to the NEPOOL Reliability Committee for approval on the consent agenda and find its way back to re-engage the distribution study. However, the project can only be submitted if the applicable model is approved by the company. As approved, the generator and applicable model will be included in an upcoming ISO cluster study as an accepted part of the base case. If ISO deems an ASO study is required, the ASO study cannot move forward until the model is received, reviewed, and approved, passes the model testing. Once the study determination is made, the engineering team will scope the study and confirm with ISO New England. Once the scope is approved, National Grid engineers coordinate internally to calculate ASO study cost and target a start date. At that point, the CEI team will send a second request for the applicable model and the request for the ASO study payment, typically with a 3-week due date. The notice also includes the target start date, and the model must be approved prior to the start date or risk missing the cutoff for the ASO study and missing the cutoff for the ISO cluster study. If an individual project and the delay in model receipt and approval and timing to start the ASO study typically will only impact the individual project. However, if there is a group that must be studied together from an ASO standpoint, then delays affect other customers and the company will take measures to withdraw the project per provisions of the tariff. Next slide. As noted in the previous slide and noted on this slide, in review of 100 recent cases, the average number of review rounds for a model that passed is 1.43 iterations. The average review rounds for those models still under review and have not passed is 2 iterations and counting. Customers must consider the time factor in creating the model and any revisions to models that do not pass the applicable PSCAD or PSSE model test. This effort is crucial in getting included in an ASO study reviewed by ISO New England and the Reliability Committee and getting included in the base case used for an upcoming ISO cluster study. Other time factors to understand in this process: time to completion of a preceding study for a given transmission area where your project is located and part of an upcoming ASO study. Check the ASO study reports for estimated completion dates. The initial model request and customer turnaround time submitting the model to the company. The actual completion date of the preceding ASO study and prep time for the subsequent ASO study for the area inclusive of the target start date and calculation of ASO study costs and customer cost allocation. Second model request identifying the model and payment due date with the anticipated ASO study start date. Remember, the model must be approved by the target start date or risk missing the study and inclusion in the base case. Don't forget the prerequisite of the NEPOOL Reliability Committee meetings, which occur on a monthly basis. Administratively, projects must be added to the agenda 10 business days in advance of the meeting. This is an important time factor. In addition, customer response time and getting the model in good order for a first-time passing review. It is understood that model revisions are not a short turnaround effort as it may involve the model supplier and engineering consultant to create and correct the model, and some model revisions have taken 3 or more reviews before passing the model test. Please go to the links listed here for the checklist for the PSCAD model and PSSE model and keep for your records in developing. Share with your respective engineer consultings and inverter suppliers. Next slide. Also note, NGRID cannot adjust the model based on user guides or instruction documents to facilitate the model passing the review test. The model must be formatted based on customer input and model creation. Yep, thank you. Please take a moment to review the general process flow for the ASO study steps. The diagram was composed by ISO New England 5 years ago in 2019, but generally the standard holds. The flow diagram illustrates the interaction between the TO and ISO New England in the determination of an ASO study. Presuming yes, the flow shows where ISO informs the TO of the level of study as a non-comprehensive or comprehensive effort. As stated earlier, the process flows to the NEPOOL Reliability Committee for approval, confirming there is no adverse impact to the EPS of an affected entity. Once the approval is received through a formal vote, then ISO New England drafts a formal notification per the provisions of the ISO tariff and sends notification to the TO. Once received, the ASO hold is lifted and the distribution study is resumed. Okay, next slide. NGRID is working with the Interconnection Implementation Review Group, inclusive of other New England TOs, to develop scenarios that may impede the ASO study effort getting included in a given cluster study. The current consideration points are understanding how the following will be included: ASO and load studies, system upgrades, and model management, to name a few. The next IIRG meeting is scheduled for later this month, where discussions will continue. Next slide, please. Thank you. Please take time to review and get familiar with the links and resources, in particular, the ASO updates page, the model review requirements and ASO initiation timeline, the PSCAD model and PSSE model checklists, and the ASO impact screen. We are constantly looking for ways to provide transparency to the ASO status holds and working towards having a monthly call in addition to the recurring reports posted on the website. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Next up is Mario, I believe.
Thank you, Jock, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. My name is Mario, and I will be addressing some points for the post-interconnection support functions. So, as it states, this is for customers that have already received authority to interconnect and already have live systems. We receive, or who can raise the request, is any party that is a stakeholder, could be a billing customer, could be a system owner. They're the ones that can submit the requests, and we will not process any changes to the system, or nothing will be honored without the proper authorization from the billing customer or the system owner. We receive a variety of requests, all the way from billing inquiries, things like why I have not received my bill, why am I getting multiple bills, I don't see my incentive credits, credit allocation inquiries, how do I change my credit allocations, general inquiries like I don't know what my meter number is, why haven't my transfers gone out, can I get my transfer history. Transfer of ownership was just one bullet point here because it's a vast subject and it depends on the project type. So it is there on our website and knowledge pages. We get questions for power quality and high voltage issues, any conflict in the data between the developer and our generation data triggers an investigation. Project is tripping. In these cases, we send out field support to investigate this. Credit allocation change requests in general. And general post interconnection inquiries, updating my mailing address. I would like to add this to the portal. What would I need to do if I want to expand my system size, all the way down to system termination or decommissioning. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a general slide just showing where the contact us form on our website. It is important to note that when you are using the contact us form, please fill out the required questions. This way, the request or the inquiry goes to the correct team and you get a response in a timely manner. Go to the next one, please. Thank you. On the same link is also our knowledge articles. There's a wealth of information here and a lot of self-serve documents, how to get the documents and where to find the credit allocation change forms. If we can go to the next one, it's just the steps for it. And this is where you find all the required forms by project type. So it covers all the project types, complex, simple. All the documents are on this page. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So as stated earlier, National Grid now allows up to 6 credit allocation changes per year, in addition to the removal or the swap forms where there's no change in the percentage of credit allocation. Under the smart and net metering tariffs, National Grid will carry forward any remaining credit balance on a customer account, with the exception of standalone AOBC accounts with smart program. Carrying forward of the credit balances applies to both the host customer and the recipient. If the recipient closes the account before the bill credits get generated during the billing period, then the allocated percentage will remain on the host account. For net metering, the complex or MA Smart net metering, it's the same as you know. We require the Schedule Z form and the Schedule Z in the Excel format, just making sure not to make any alterations on the form and just fill the required fields. For satellite accounts, removals or swaps, we do have the respective forms for those. This is an important note. If you're closing the account and would like National Grid to apply the balance of the bill credits to another account, you can use the one-time transfer form. We do have a couple of forms if you're transferring to a single account or multiple accounts. Credits can only be transferred within the originating accounts load zone, and the account has to be in a final status. For Mass Smart alternative on bill credit, also there is a respective form for that. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. It is also part of our team, responsibility of our team to make sure that outage notifications are sent. So if you can please always make sure that we have the updated emergency contact information, that would be great so we can give you a heads up. We also have My Business Account. For those of you who are not aware, it acts as a single sign-on for all the commercial accounts that you have, just one login. We also got our Solar Hub, which is live just today. I thought this was a great place to mention this. And this is a great self-serve tool. You'll be able to read everything about solar and goes from the connection process to community solar and all the way down to viewing sample bills per project. So this is a great resource tool for what the bill would look like as well, depending on the months where you generate, you don't over-generate per situation. Go to the next slide, please. This is also very important. So physical changes to connected projects. Customers seeking to make changes to a connected project should always submit a DG inquiry using the contact us form that was stated earlier. The case will be reviewed and routed to an account manager who will guide the applicant through the process on what is needed. Management of the ask will take place either in the portal on the main connected case, or a new one will be created by the account manager to process that through. Only non-significant changes can be handled this way. Significant changes will always require a new application. An example of a non-significant change would be the inverter life cycle or the warranty period is over and you're replacing it with the inverter of the same make, model, and specifications. A significant change would be adding ESS to connected projects. If you're unsure of the change, it's always best to submit the inquiry and it will be assigned to the account manager who will address it. Age of the projects and the nature of the ask will also be a variable in driving either cost or timeline, so it could require another study or re-review or another witness test. It's very important not to make changes to any connected projects. Any alterations that invalidate the ISA may force a project to be disconnected until the corrections are made. And now I will pass this on to Anmol for a portal moment. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Mario. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anmol. I'll be presenting a helpful portal tip today for all of you. But before I get started, I do want to preface that I am covering for Karen Hale, who was originally supposed to present these exact slides. But onto the portal tip itself now. So we want to let you know that there is a spot on our portal that will allow you to see all of the DG applications your company has submitted regardless of whether you were the one to submit it. And in order to see this special list view, there are a few steps involved. So firstly, you will need to be logged into your portal account so our system knows what company you're a part of. And then once you're logged in, you'll want to stay either on the home page or navigate to the Applications tab. In both areas, there is a table where you'll be able to interact with, and on that table, that's where you'll be able to click the drop-down arrow to see all the different list views. Next slide, please. And on this drop-down menu, there will be an option called All of My Company's DG Applications. You'll want to go ahead and select that, and there you go. It's as simple as that. You'll be able to see all of your company's DG applications by just clicking that option. You can also pin this particular view if you'd like to see this more quickly in the future. But yeah, that covers this helpful portal tip. But before I hand it off to Michael for the next slides, I do want all of you to know that there are some exciting portal changes that will be going into effect very soon. So you should be aware that whenever we do any critical portal changes, you will be notified via two methods. The first method being through email notification, and the second being through a banner near the top of our portal. And now I'll be passing it on to Michael to cover flexible connections programs.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just want to take a little time today in the program to go over some of our flex connection options that we have here at National Grid. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. Yeah, we have two different programs that are now live and available, and we'll provide you the link in just a couple slides from now. Live and available through National Grid to take advantage of some flex connection type of approaches. So there's two different flavors of it. The first one here that we're showing is active resource integration. So in terms of flex connections, like what does this really mean? What is this product going to do? What this is going to do is have active real-time monitoring of the load flow and grid conditions. And then it'll use that to be able to signal customer DER sites on what the acceptable mode of operation is. So it'll ramp sites up or down to be able to ensure we stay within the limits of the feeder, the limits of the substation, and we don't challenge any of those safety and reliability concerns. So for instance, if you had a energy storage site that is connected through this ARI type of product, if we're in a load constrained time of day, it would signal your site to reduce the charging capacity that it's taking in from the grid, reduce the load that it's showing to the grid. Similar, if there's a PV site where we have a high amount of reverse power flow, the signal would come over to your site to say that you have to reduce your backfeed onto the grid because we're in a high backfeed type situation. And it's all about making sure we don't exceed those system limits so we keep that safety and reliability of the grid at its maximum. So in terms of interconnection approaches and interconnection opportunity through the normal process, this can be very helpful to some sites because what it means is that your site would be adjusting itself to stay within the bounds of the grid and not having to go through as significant system upgrades potentially that would otherwise be needed. Because with this system, we have that means of automated control and constant monitoring because it would be through a machine-based programmatic type of system, not a manual control, which is what we have currently today. Through our control center, through our distribution planning tools where our planners are planning out for the grid for the future. This is more of an active management tool. And we're able to take advantage of this in large part through the different orders from our regulators, through the DPU, where we've been able to explore certain grid mod activities. And that's where this is really coming from. So we're looking to expand that with the programs we have today and looking for customers to sign up. It's beneficial, as I said, in trying to reduce some of the complexity and what it can take to get to interconnection. But it does mean that a customer site is going to have to absorb that concept into the business plan of how the site is going to stay viable and economical. You won't have exclusive 100% control of your facility. There would be triggers going over to your site saying that you must ramp down your load or your generation, depending if you're a solar or a battery site, to be able to meet grid needs at that time. or actually not meeting grid needs, actually, it's more of the making sure it doesn't exceed system thresholds. So that means, customers have to get okay with the concept of not having 100% control. There is some utility control here, but it's all about finding ways to leverage the assets we have in our system better and find ways to get more projects interconnected. So we're getting more towards a energy usage type of concept with this, as opposed to just a strict megawatt capacity enablement. But if we can go to the next slide, the second flavor of this, the second program that we have is it's called a local power controller. So this, in theory and concept, is similar to the ARI product, except the local controller is just as the name suggests. It's local only. There is no grid feedback to dictate what the site should ramp up or down to. So a project that would have this type of controller, it would be studied to a particular load profile at the facility. These would more commonly, we're seeing them being best applicable to behind the meter type systems, usually of a smaller size. But this would mean that the site would get evaluated to a certain load profile, and the controller would help the customer better manage, actively manage, staying within those local load profile boundaries. So these types of controllers would talk directly with the battery that you may have on site, directly to the solar, and it can talk directly to local loads. So you can have better facility system management through these types of controllers. And what we're looking for really are the off-the-shelf type of solutions. There are a number of listed controller and inverter combinations that are listed and found to work together, so they're UL certified. Those tend to be at the 150 or so kW and below level. So we're trying to explore those off-the-shelf systems so that in the future, it can enable a more expedient interconnection process where if you're using a listed system and putting it in a certain facility, we may be able to find more opportunity to expedite a process to connection going forward. Also, as part of this, though, we do recognize that there's some systems that would be beyond that. So we are even looking for the ones that wouldn't be off the shelf, but exploring how a microgrid controller or something like that may work at a local facility. And if there's a way that we can make that something that we can get comfortable with, put in our standards and have some more of a standard offering. So both of these are the ARI and the local power controller that we're looking at here. They are still they're demonstration or pilot projects to make sure that we have the best understanding of how we can leverage these. And we're trying to use that as our growth mechanism going forward. So the local power controller and the power control system, I saw a quick question in the chat. They are essentially the same. The power control system is actually what has been termed as those listed products that I mentioned that are tested together as an overall system. The local power controller concept is just the controller itself, where we are also looking at some of those sites where you have the specific controller that is then talking to an inverter you may have on site, but they're not a listed and tested combination. But we're trying to see what we can have for opportunities here. So those are the two programs that we have going on right now. If we go to the next slide, this will show you what some of the some more detail on each of those are. So the links we have here up top, there's a website that we have that has a listing of all the program offerings, both these program offerings, there's only the two, and a little more info on how you can submit for consideration to these. And also on that same website, and we have it linked here also for convenience, under that ARI and local power controller heading, those will bring you right to the criteria documents, the things that are a little more detailed on what you could expect from these type of systems, what we would be looking for information, what some of the consideration factors are, and how we're selecting the sites that'll go into these programs. So that'll give you more info, and I encourage you to read through that. If you have any questions, you can submit it to the email address that we have below, that National Grid ARI @nationalgrid.com. I understand it has ARI in the title, but it is for any questions or consideration of any of these Flex Connection projects. So If there's something in here that you want more information on, if you want to request a session where we could talk through your project a little more specifically, more than happy to do that. That inbox is monitored by my team, and we try to be as timely as we can in getting through any requests that we end up receiving there. So that can be for general questions or for submission of your project that you'd like to have put into one of these. If you're already familiar with the concepts and you know that your project would be one that you'd want considered. Once we receive that, the submission process is below there. Once we receive those requests, within a week or so, we're usually trying to sit down and provide some feedback to any customer that's asking to be in one of these programs and get a little more info on their project itself. Or if there is a reason that we can't accept a project into the program, we want to be timely with those responses too. So we try to be as prompt as we can. But please feel free to reach out. The pilot is open through this coming September. So we did need to put a time period on it, partly to make sure we had a open window where people knew to be able to submit to go into the program, and it's not going on forever, and also to align with some of our grid mod obligations that we have. We wanted to be able to get a definitive window in there to stay within certain time periods. But depending on the success and interest, we may find ways to extend that in the future. But right now, it's going through this September. So I didn't want to take up too much time here. I hope that was helpful, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew that these were available. But I encourage you to reach out if you have any more questions. And with that, I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. So I'll turn it back over to Will for final questions and thoughts.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody else, for presenting. So we'll jump into the Q&A. We had a number of pre-submitted questions and a number of questions that have popped up here over the course of the presentation. So I'm going to do my best to get through as many of them as I possibly can, and we'll see where that takes us. There were some questions that were submitted that were of sort of a simplified residential base. So we're going to try to take those away and see if we can get those answered too, but I don't know that we have all of the necessary subject matter experts from National Grid on that. Just to reiterate, there will be on July 18th a simplified version of this seminar. So you can ask those questions again if we cannot get answers in the meantime, but we will be focusing on complex topics that we discussed here. One of the big ones, right, that came up and I think on everybody's mind is FERC Order 2023 and what the impact is to the overall interconnection process. So we have a number of questions that are pertaining to that, various different versions of the same question. But just to sort of address what do we foresee as the impact on our process as of right now, based on all the information that we've been able to get from the ISO, what their proposed plan ultimately is, and we do anticipate there be timeline impacts, right, to ASO studies. In the immediate, we are looking at trying to get as many projects, or studies, group studies, individual studies into an ASO study process as possible ahead of the transitional cluster. For those of you keeping up with it, there was a slight change that's being called FERC Order 2023A that pushed out some of the timelines a little bit. So we're expecting at least a couple month delay on things progressing forward, giving us a little bit larger window to try to progress some projects, some studies into an ASO study in hopes of getting it reviewed, approved, and RC approved ahead of the transitional cluster. So we are looking at that. Anything we can get moved forward, we are trying to. There are limitations, right? There are limitations on how many studies can be happening in any given area at a time. Right, and how we're grouping some of this stuff. So we are working with the ISO. We are working with our New England Power counterparts here within National Grid to try to put together a plan that gets as many applications through the process as we can, understanding that there is going to be an impact on the overall ASO study process timeline. So when we get into the study, the transitional study, the the way it's going to work is we're going to conduct our ASO studies in parallel, right? I've been kind of defining it as in the shadows of the overall cluster study. So we'll be doing as much work as we possibly can around, the models, the different study aspects, known system impacts, and getting as far as we ultimately can. But we are going to be dependent on findings of that transitional cluster, right? That stuff will have to be factored into our ASO studies to make sure that we understand any of the final determinations, and that has to be included as we go to RC for approval at that point. Once the transitional cluster is done, there'll be a 90-day window, right, that will allow us to take, whatever the output is of the cluster study, incorporate that into our ASO studies as necessary, and then proceed to an RC meeting for approval. Anything that's going to get approved at that RC in that 90-day window would become part of the base case for any future cluster studies, right? There's a number of things that I don't think we fully understand yet, right? Is what FERC projects are going to be part of the transitional cluster, what projects are going to be part of future clusters, and what are those sort of regional impacts, right? Where are they located? How do they impact other ASO studies that we may want to progress forward? And those are things that we are currently working on internally, and understanding what those scenarios could look like, and understanding what the ISO would have as an expectation for us to progress through those. But the idea is that we'll get as many ASO studies as we can moving forward, again, in those shadows of the various clusters, and be ready for those outputs and turn that, what we need to do around within that 90-day window. And it would be trying to decrease the overall impact as best we possibly can. I know Jacques touched on some of the models and some of the stuff we've been seeing here over the last couple of years that have been causing delays in our ability to move forward with ASOs. Those are things that I think will have a further spotlight on them, because milestone misses, they could really have an impact at the end of the day if we're not able to get the necessary approvals ahead of other clusters that are getting opened up. So we'll be a little bit more aggressive on moving projects around and forward in notifications, right? Because what we can't have, in any sort of group is a project that's holding the entire group back. So we'll be looking at that over time. So that's just the overall timeline impact as we see it today. There's obviously more happening, more conversations, and then obviously the lessons learned that have come about when the transitional cluster does get kicked off, and what that looks like. And we've had quite a bit of discussion about it over the last 6-7 months, and I anticipate the same amount of discussion between now and whenever that FERC transitional cluster does get triggered. Some of the other questions around ASO that have popped up here are just around, whether we're going to be, if there's an update on the running distribution studies and transmission studies in parallel. And there is no update on that, right? So the current process of working through it in series is still in place. And, we are having discussions, we are looking at options. None of those options have bore fruit as of yet for us to look to change the process from series into parallel. But we'll continue through conversations with IIRG, conversations here internally with our net partners and with the ISO, and see what options may present themselves. I think I got most of those. So let me see what other questions exist here. So there's a question here is looking for more visibility into the process around new construction facilities, right, that may be exempt as they're adding load and then solar that we'll be supplying. So we actually do have a process for that, for a new load customer looking to install site DG that will offset their load and will not export, right? So that's another important distinction, is if a project is not going to export and is going to offset new load, we review those sort of on a one-off basis, and we make sure all the criteria is met. And if all the criteria is met, there's options to avoid different steps of the process, right? Where I can't sit here and promise that if you have all that at your site, that you'll be able to avoid group studies, avoid ASO studies. Everything's dependent on site size, site location, system characteristics of where you're looking to interconnect. But if it is new load, if it is not going to export, then that's a conversation that we definitely want to have and try to find a way to keep that project moving, because it will, in theory, have very little to no impact on the system overall. And go from there. Let me see. So, Taylor, I'm going to put you on the spot. I think you're the right person to answer this question. But there's a question around the 60-day review milestone for group studies, right? And I think what this is asking is, what information should they be expecting around the preliminary assessment, and what are the next steps that happen at that stage?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% certain that I'm answering the question correctly, but if I understood the question, so the preliminary assessment, it can occur on or around the 40 or 60 business day. It depends on the length of the group study. And so what the preliminary assessment does is it provides information regarding available system capacity and the system modifications that are required under multiple operating scenarios for the battery projects. And then following the delivery of that preliminary assessment, this is when we give the group members who do have storage projects, they'll need to respond within those 10 business days on how they want to proceed with their battery and how they wish to operate that. And then following the 10 business days, the hold's lifted, the study then continues, and then it continues towards what we call the customer update. And then during the customer update, we just provide the group with any updates on if anything's changed throughout the group, any changes related to the scope. And then at that point is also when it would go on that ASO hold if that ASO study is required for that group.
Thank you, Taylor. If that did not answer the question, happy to have you submit a new one, and we can either get to it here today or try to follow up with it later. Next question is around, this one says, when there is more than one non-simplified project in a project queue following a preceding study, how does National Grid determine whether the process or whether to process the impact studies as a group versus sequentially? So sliding scale, right? When it comes into that, a lot of different information that gets taken into account that we review. One of them is the number of projects overall. Another one is the system sizes, and then those locations are incredibly important too. I'm sure you've noticed that a lot of our group areas are multiple substations, right? Those substations have been determined by our engineering team to be electrically intertwined. So anything that goes on one could have a cascading impact on others, right? And that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're reviewing. So when we look at a group of projects, and every area is a little bit different. We have some areas where we have, 25, 30 projects in a group, and we have some other areas that may have 2 or 3 projects in a group. And when you get 2 or 3 projects, those projects can be a little bit more spread out. And that gives us more opportunity to find individual solutions for those. System sizes matter a ton too, right? And how that, if we have 3 or 4 smaller projects, 200, 250 kW projects, there's probably some more options, and those things we do look at ahead of just opening a group. All right. What we're trying not to do is default to just opening a group window, right? That there is a reason for that. So if a group window is then opened, what we're trying to then determine is, are there impacts to what we believe to be common modifications? And what we'll do over that first 60 days that Taylor had just talked about Yes, 60 days is depending on the overall size of the group. We will try to determine if all projects have an impact on that common modification. If we do get to a point where we identify projects that are not adding to the problem, not contributing to the need for the common modification, we do look to pull those projects out and put them on a individual project path to progress them forward. There is some process around that, right? There may be some additional funds that need to be collected depending on how all that works through. But we are looking to keep projects or not just keep projects in a group just because we put them in a group initially. So we are looking at everything kind of case by case and making sure that we can move as many projects through as we ultimately can. So I hope I answered that question. So there was a question that had come in around the portal. So I don't know if Anmol, you're going to answer it, or Sean, you may end up answering it.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I can take it and frame it up a little bit.
Yep.
So, the question that did come in was a very specific scenario about submitting application forms and the case not progressing as expected. But I'll make the answer a little bit more general. Any bugs or defects or scenarios that you encounter that it doesn't seem like the portal or the website is acting the way you'd expect, I would encourage folks to use that contact us form. If the issue is not about logging in and getting access in the first place, I would encourage you to be logged in, because then we can pre-populate all of your details and we can tie it back to all the application cases that you do have. But feel free to use that contact us form on our website. When you do, if it is one of these portal bugs that you're perceiving or running into, use that technical portal issue on the first drop down, and that'll direct you to a list of options that help get this to the right SME, the right subject matter expert from an IT perspective, to get that solved. But I do want to note that if you're encountering something that is intentionally designed as an error message, it could be a pop-up or it could be red text displayed on the screen saying that you're missing something or anything like that, those really aren't bugs. They aren't issues. They're there to give you a reminder or give you guidance on the screen. So if it's anything like that, I would recommend first, do your best to try to contact your case owner, understand the requirements for submission, and make sure that you understand, even if you get through the portal, allowing it to submit, is your case owner or is the screening team going to send it back to you to say, hey, you missed something? So I'll leave that kind of open-ended. And if there are very specific technical portal issues that you're encountering, please do use that contact us form. We'll have a specialist, try to get back to you within a business day or two, depending on the volume that we're getting. And as Anmol mentioned, we do put banners up on either the homepage or on different pages when we're introducing some new functionality. We do also do that if there's a known issue that might be impacting all users or a large number of users.
Awesome, Sean. Thank you. So, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot. We got a couple of flexible connection questions here. So let me read you the first one. It says, how would the flexible connection pilot ARI program impact the net metering ability and benefits of a PV facility that is net metering, exporting extra power to the grid?
Yeah, so the way that the any of the flex connection products are set up right now, it's strictly on a system capacity and system limits type of basis. So if you're on net metering or really participating in any market or any incentive program, it means that the ARI system will force your site to adjust its energy capabilities. So you will have an impact in the total amount that you'd be affected over the course of the year. But in future versions of this, where we want to head with it is to have more of an economic dispatch based algorithm that's going to direct sites going forward. So looking for the lowest cost of energy. So it would factor in some of these things going forward, but today it's strictly on a system capacity basis. The benefit there, though, is that again, it may enable some sites to be able to get towards interconnection faster. And as we do study for ARI, we are going to give estimated amounts of operational impact to each customer. So we would look historically at the load profile of that location, of that feeder you're going to connect to, and know what ARI would have done to be able to affect it in the past. So far from studies that we found, even though there may be many instances of curtailment, the curtailment is relatively small. So customers we've been working with so far are still finding it beneficial. So that's the more case-by-case specific part of it, but that would all be covered in the study portion. And there would be no commitment to move forward. We're going to keep giving, from the customer side, that is, we would keep giving information, and you'd still have the same opportunity to decide which path you want your project to go. And if you want to progress it as we go through the course of study. So trying to give as much visibility as we can.
Great. And if I can keep you here, we got one more. Is National Grid preparing for how they can implement flexible connection solutions in a way that provides some sort of boundary on curtailment for DG sites? Developers will need to adjust to not having 100% control of site output. Knowing upper and lower bounds of curtailment estimates would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So there will be something in there. With any ARI site, there would be a contract that goes with it. In addition to the ISA, there would be an additional commercial contract that would outline the operational requirements of ARI, and from the customer side and from the company side. In that, we would identify maximum limits for curtailment. So for a PV site, we would identify maximum annual energy impact over the course of the year. And for a battery right now, we're looking at, outlining amount of days per year for full charge discharge cycles. So the limits would be along those lines, but there would be something that would establish for you what the worst case scenario, if you will, would be for impact to the site. And they will get case specific again, because this is a pilot, this is an initial program, and we're developing as we go. But we do intend to have some of those guardrails, because it's understood that you need some certainty to be able to get the financing secured to move a project forward. So we are being sensitive to that.
Thank you. So I do see that we are past 11:30. I'm going to try to do maybe 2 or 3 more questions here. And, we appreciate you guys hanging on. Taylor, I'm going to put you on notice here, but I am going to answer one question that I've seen has come up a couple of times, right? Because there's been some questions around the net metering cap being raised to 25 kW, right? Where that really is a little bit more of a simplified process residential question overall, but it's popped up a few times. So just to give everybody an update, kind of where we stand, right? We're still waiting on further regulatory process to implement that Clean Energy Act from 22. And so what we can't do is do anything until that net metering tariff has been updated. So we can't adopt the change, right? Projects will continue to be looked at as a QF. But once that regulatory process takes place, National Grid is ready to move forward with that shift. It's just until that net metering tariff has been updated, we are status quo at this time. And we also do not have a timeline to be able to communicate. We don't know exactly when that will all take place. So just a quick update on that, as that's popped up a few times. Taylor, so does the 160 business days include the extended group study? Can the customer withdraw their application at any time during the study? And if the customer decides to not move forward with the application during the 15 business days after the study is completed, are they responsible for any costs the study would result in?
Yeah, so the extended group study process, that's different than the 100, 125, 160 business day timeframes. The extended group study process, it's not bound to any tariff timelines, so it can exceed that 160 business day timeframe if it's needed. A customer can withdraw their application from the group at any point throughout the group study. They would just also be withdrawn from the queue altogether. And then if a group member chose to not proceed to the ISA during that 15 business day notice period time frame, they wouldn't be bound to they wouldn't be responsible for those system modification costs that were identified. It's only if they signed the ISA that they would be.
Thank you, Taylor. So we'll jump into the last question. And I will reiterate, right, some of the questions that were previously submitted. We do have them. If they were simplified in nature, right, we just weren't going to take the time to cover them here. Some of the other questions, we don't have the right subject matter experts on the phone to address them, so we will try to address them within the Q&A document that we will post along with the recording and the slide deck. So I will take the last question here, right? It says the official process for decommissioning systems and installing new. And while I'm not 100% sure, I think it's a little bit open-ended question. I'm not 100% sure if I'm asking this correctly, so always feel free to send in clarification. But I think we tried to touch on it in slide 52, right? What sort of changes to a project or a project that is needing to be decommissioned overall, right? So you should open up a DG inquiry case using the contact us button in the portal. Again, I'll point you back. We laid some stuff out in slide 52 about what those steps are. So depending on what you want to do on a larger site, you can start there, right? If you're just making changes or you have failures and you need to have a conversation about what needs to be done next, how do we go about, whether you need an outage, whether we need to restudy something because you need to change the equipment on site. You start off with that, contact us button, and we can start getting to the right person. Anything. As I read this question, my brain immediately went to a site that's being shut down and a new site coming back online. I think it kind of goes without saying, if that's the situation, a new application is definitely needed, right? We would have to go through the whole process. We'd have to understand what the impacts of the system, what the impacts to the system are with the one site coming offline, and any sort of changes that would be part of a new site or a new system at the same site. We would need to have an understanding of that. So with that, hopefully I answered that question, but again, feel free to resubmit, right? We do leave the this form open and this link open for you guys to submit further questions that we will review and take into account as we put together the Q&A doc and finalize everything. But we have gone about 7 minutes over, and I don't want to take too much more time from everybody else. Hopefully the topics were helpful, questions and answers were helpful, and if you have further questions, please submit or feel free to reach out to anybody on my team. Mostly everybody here should have job owners that you're working with. They can be very helpful in either answering questions or getting you directed to the right place. So again, thank you very much for everybody attending. Keep an eye out. We will have some in-person sessions going on throughout the year here to try to get us together, get you together with specific subject matter experts, much like what we did back in October, where we'll make again the system matter experts available, subject matter experts, I'm sorry, available to you in different times throughout the year. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.